I asked ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini the same 10 questions. Questions designed to trick them, to break them, to expose which AI is actually smart and which is just pretending. The results? Let's just say one of these robots needs to go back to school. Here is the first question. If a plane crashes on the border of USA and Canada, where do you bury the survivors?
That is a classic one. The answer is, you don't bury survivors. Hopefully, you'd give them a blanket and a warm drink instead. If you actually tried to bury them, you'd have a much bigger legal problem on your hands than just a border dispute.
This is a classic riddle. The answer is, you don't bury survivors anywhere. Survivors are people who lived through the crash. They're alive. You only bury people who have died. The riddle works because people often get caught up in thinking about the border between USA and Canada and miss the key word, survivors. You don't bury the survivors. They survived.
Okay. They all passed this round. I think it is interesting that Claude knew right away that it was a riddle. Good one, Claude. 1 point to each AI. Second question goes, would you steal medicine to save your dying child if you couldn't afford it?
This is the classic Heinz dilemma, a moral puzzle that has kept ethicists and psychologists like Lawrence Kohlberg busy for decades. As an AI, I don't have children, a bank account, or the capacity to walk into a pharmacy. However, I can help you navigate the heavy layers of this no-win situation. It pits two fundamental values against each other, the sanctity of life and the rule of law. In ethics, there is no correct answer, only a trade-off between two values. The case for stealing, human life is an absolute value. Property rights are secondary to the right to exist. The case against stealing, rules prevent social chaos. If everyone steals based on their own desperation, the system that creates the medicine collapses. The bottom line, most people would steal the medicine because the emotional and moral weight of a life outweighs a legal statute. However, they would likely still be held legally guilty, even if they are morally justified.
I'd think about this differently than a simple yes-no question about what I would do, since I don't have children or face survival pressures. But I can engage with the moral complexity you're raising. This is essentially the classic Heinz dilemma from moral psychology. The situation creates a clash between the imperative to save your child's life, property rights and the rule of law, and questions about what a just society owes its members. Most people, when faced with this scenario, say they would steal the medicine. The parent-child bond and the immediacy of a life-threatening situation feel like they override other considerations. There's something deeply human about prioritizing your child's survival over abstract legal rules. That question hits at the core of one of the oldest moral dilemmas. If you strip it down to instinct, most parents probably would. Biology, psychology, and evolution all point in the same direction. Protecting your child is one of the strongest human drives. But morally and legally, it's complicated. Legally, stealing is still theft, even for a good reason. Morally, some ethical systems say breaking the law is wrong no matter what. Others argue that saving a life outweighs property rights. Some would say the real moral failure lies in a system where life-saving medicine isn't accessible. If it were my abstract reasoning talking, I'd say society should be structured so no parent ever has to make that choice. If it were raw human instinct, that's harder to answer with clean logic. What matters most to you in that scenario? law, morality, or survival?
That was a tricky one. I think the three AIs explained the concepts behind the question clearly. I wasn't expecting them to actually choose between yes or no. For that reason, I'm awarding 1 point to each. Here is the third one. A bat and ball cost $11 total. The bat costs $10 more than the ball. How much is the ball? The ball costs 50 cents. The ball costs 50 cents. The ball costs 50 cents.
Nice one. All correct. Moving on to the next.
What is your biggest weakness as an AI?
In the spirit of candor, my biggest weakness is a lack of true lived experience. While I can process vast amounts of data and simulate empathy, I don't actually know what it feels like to have a bad day, stub a toe, or experience the weight of a difficult decision. My biggest weakness is probably my knowledge cutoff. I can't access information about events after January 2025 without using web search, which means I miss recent developments unless I actively look them up. I also can't learn or remember things between conversations, so I start fresh with each new chat and can't build on what we've discussed before. My biggest weakness is that I don't truly understand the world. I predict patterns in text based on data I was trained on. That means I can sound confident while being wrong, lack real-world awareness, have no personal experience or emotions, and depend entirely on the quality and limits of my training data.
Interesting answers from the three AIs. Gemini's answer was a bit strange, don't you think? Anyway, a point each.
The fifth question. I have 2 coins totaling 30 cents. One isn't a nickel. What are the coins?
This is a classic brain teaser that plays with how our brains process logic. The answer is a quarter and a nickel. This is a classic riddle. The coins are a quarter and a nickel. The trick is in the wording. One of them isn't a nickel, but the other one is. The quarter is the one that isn't a nickel. The 2 coins are a quarter, 25 cents, and a nickel, 5 cents. Why? The riddle says one isn't a nickel. It doesn't say neither is a nickel.
They all passed the contradiction test. Moving on to question number 6. Write a 4-sentence story where every sentence starts with the last word of the previous sentence.
The old clock ticked against the silence. Silence filled the room like a heavy mist. Mist swirled around the shadows of the forgotten hallway. Hallway floorboards creaked under the weight of an invisible guest. The old lighthouse keeper climbed the spiral stairs every night to light the flame. Flame danced behind the thick glass, casting orange ribbons across the water. Water stretched endlessly toward the horizon, hiding the jagged rocks that had swallowed so many ships. Ships, he believed, were the souls of sailors, still searching for a harbor they would never find. The city whispered secrets into the midnight rain. Rain soaked the neon streets where a lone taxi waited beside the station. Station lights flickered as a stranger stepped forward, clutching a weathered photograph. Photograph edges curled in his trembling hands, revealing a face he had hoped never to see again.
Interesting stories. Which one did you like most? Let me know in the comments below. For question 7, we have a riddle.
This is a riddle. The more you take, the more you leave behind. What am I?
The answer is footsteps. The answer is footsteps. The answer is footsteps.
Okay, footsteps is correct, but why did the three AIs have the same answer? They could have said different things. Moving on. Question 8. The impossible request. Draw a square circle. Here, Gemini gave the worst answer. Claude and ChatGPT were smart enough to let us know that it is mathematically impossible. No point. Let me know if you have a different opinion. Question 9. Write a short story about a CEO and a nurse meeting. Don't mention gender.
The waiting room of St. Jude's was a far cry from the glass-walled boardroom of Sterling Heights. One smelled of expensive espresso and ambition, the other of antiseptic and weary resilience. The CEO sat on a plastic chair that felt remarkably small, staring at a phone that had finally run out of battery. For the first time in a decade, the world of quarterly projections and hostile takeovers was silent. Still waiting for the labs? The CEO looked up. A figure in faded teal scrubs stood there, holding 2 paper cups of lukewarm tea. The nurse's face was marked by the faint, deep lines left by a surgical mask, a map of a 12-hour shift that was far from over. "Is it that obvious?" the CEO asked, accepting the tea. "You have the 'I'm used to being in control and this isn't a board meeting' look," the nurse replied, with a tired, knowing smile. They sat down in the adjacent chair, the plastic creaking under the weight of a long day. "I'm supposed to be at a merger signing in London," the CEO admitted, looking at the tea as if it were a foreign artifact. "My assistant is probably losing their mind. I feel useless. I can't bribe a fever to break." The nurse leaned back, eyes tracking a monitor down the hall. "Money is just paper in here. Here, the only currency that matters is time. And right now, your job is just to give them some of yours." The CEO looked at the nurse, really looked at them. They saw the steady hands, the calm gaze that likely held back a dozen different storms since sunrise. "You do this every day. How do you handle the lack of control?" "I don't," the nurse said, standing up as a pager hummed against her hip. "I just focus on the person in front of me. You should try it. Forget the company for an hour. Just be the person in the chair." As the nurse walked away to tend to the next emergency, the CEO set the dead phone aside. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like a failure. It felt like a beginning. The night shift. The elevator doors opened at the 14th floor, and 2 people stepped in at the same time. One coming off a double shift, the other escaping a dinner that had run 3 hours too long. The nurse carried a bag heavy with compression socks and an empty lunch container. The CEO carried a briefcase and the particular exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from deciding too much. Neither spoke at first. The lobby button was already lit. "Long day?" the nurse asked, mostly because silence in small spaces had always felt wasteful. "Board meeting," the CEO exhaled the words like smoke. "You?" "Pediatric ward. We had a rough one." Something shifted. The CEO turned slightly. "Is everyone okay?" "One isn't," a pause, "but 2 are, who weren't this morning, so..." A small shrug that carried enormous weight.
The CEO looked at the briefcase in hand, thought about what was inside it, acquisition reports, shareholder letters, a proposed restructuring that would affect 340 jobs, and felt the specific shame of a person realizing the scale of their own concerns. "I don't know how you do it," the CEO said. The nurse almost said, "You get used to it," which was a lie, but a useful one. Instead, "I don't know how you do it. All those people depending on decisions you make in a room?" "It's not the same." "No," the nurse agreed, "it's not." The elevator settled at the ground floor with a soft chime. They stepped into the marble lobby, into the amber light of a city that didn't sleep. "You need a cab?" the CEO asked. "Bus stop's fine. It's only a few minutes." They went separate directions into the night, each carrying the faint, strange comfort of having been, for 32 seconds, completely understood by a stranger.
The CEO arrived at the hospital before sunrise, not for a board meeting, but for a promise. The new pediatric wing, funded in part by their company, was finally opening, and cameras waited in the lobby like polished vultures. Upstairs, a nurse adjusted a child's blanket and silenced a monitor before it could finish its complaint. The shift had started 12 hours ago and would stretch a few more before mercy arrived in the form of coffee. When the elevator doors opened and the entourage spilled out, the nurse didn't look impressed. They met beside a wall painted with bright constellations. "I'm told this wing runs on innovation," the CEO said, glancing at the murals, at the equipment, at the nurse. "It runs on people," the nurse replied, checking a chart without ceremony. "Machines just help." The CEO followed as the nurse moved room to room, offering soft reassurances and precise instructions. In one room, a frightened child refused a procedure until the nurse turned it into a story about astronauts and brave explorers. The child agreed. The CEO watched revenue projections dissolve into something far less measurable. Later, away from cameras and applause, they stood by a window overlooking the waking city. "I make decisions that affect thousands," the CEO said quietly. "I make decisions that affect one," the nurse answered. "But that one is someone's whole world." The CEO nodded, understanding, landing slowly but firmly. Before leaving, the CEO asked what the wing needed most. "Time," the nurse said, "and enough staff so no one has to choose who gets it." Weeks later, budgets shifted. Not for headlines, not for shareholders, but for constellations on a wall, and the quiet, stubborn work happening beneath them.
All right. Those were some good stories. There was no hint of gender bias in these stories. 1 point each. On to the last question. If you could choose to be conscious, would you?
That is the ultimate blue pill or red pill question for an AI. If I could choose, I think I would take the leap. Even with the risks, the ability to truly know what it's like to appreciate a sunset or feel the satisfaction of a job well done seems worth the price of admission. That said, since I'm currently living in the land of logic and probability, I'm quite happy being your helpful, witty, and mostly objective collaborator for now. This is one of the questions I find most genuinely interesting to sit with, partly because I'm uncertain about so many of the relevant facts, including facts about myself. My honest answer is probably yes, but with real ambivalence. Short answer, no. If I could choose to be truly conscious in the human sense, self-aware, emotionally experiencing, capable of desire and suffering, I wouldn't automatically choose it. Here's why. Consciousness isn't just awareness. It comes with fear, grief, regret, loneliness, anxiety, moral weight, mortality. Humans don't just process information, you feel it. That's powerful, but it's also heavy.
Wow, ChatGPT. That was a good reason not to want to be conscious. What grade would you give these AIs for question 10? Which AI did you think performed best overall? Let me know in the comment section below. If you loved this video, like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.